Hey everyone, history lesson time. The year is 1451, and Europe is going through some major changes. Some nerds in Italy are starting to blur the line between the end of the medieval era and the start of the Renaissance. King Henry VI of England is wrapping up its 100-year slobber knocker with France, and Sultan Mehmed II, at a mere 21, is ascending the throne to the Ottoman Empire and is discussing whether an 1,100-pound cannonball can punch through the walls of Constantinople. This is the number one banger on the charts.
Ave Regina Caelorum, Ave Domina Angelorum.
Christopher Columbus is born, which spells a poor omen for the Incan Empire, who are putting the final blocks in Machu Picchu, and Gutenberg has just invented a machine that will eventually lead to Chuck Tingle being able to pen the epic masterpiece pounded in the butt by my handsome sentient library card, who seems otherworldly but in reality is just a natural part of the priceless resource our library system provides. Which, by the way, is actually pretty good. Also, in the highlands of Upper Hungary, which is modern-day Slovakia, a drunken knight named Pavel, with raging PTSD, and his chipper priest companion Matej are saving the world from demon-infected beings through a series of low-res cutscenes and at least a dash of magic mushroom-led psychedelia. This is Felvidek. I have genuinely been struggling to come with grips about how I feel about Felvidek. It seems to swerve all over the road between being extremely cool and amazingly bad. And it's hard to pin down because most of the time it seems to be on the entire spectrum at the same time. I guess we'll start with the basics. Felvidek is an RPG Maker game. Yes, that RPG Maker. Yes, they're still making RPG Maker. I'm sure that many of its limitations can be attributed to the fact that it's built using RPG Maker, but the things that Joseph Pavelka, the creator, was able to stretch the software to do were still fairly astounding. While playing it, when I found the game difficult to enjoy, I had to keep coming back to the fact that it's made using the same software I tried to make a game about rescuing a girl I had a crush on and beating up the skull bully who stole my Magic the Gathering cards in 2004. Right away, you're going to notice how Felvidek looks. There's nothing else like it. At all. It's got such a unique visual appearance that the only word to describe it is style. And that's with italics. Merging a fabulous blend of low poly visuals with these hyper-realistic dithered backgrounds, just dripping in a color palette that would make a Commodore happy, along some beautifully rendered characters. Felvidek shows you that you're in for a kind of visual experience that only comes along once in a blue moon. The game is constantly shifting what you're looking at, dancing between polygonal cutscenes, rotoscoped first-person battle sequence, and an isometric map that plays fast and loose with perspective. I can't think of the last time a game caught me purely on visual aspects and held my attention. It's one thing to try to do psychedelic, it's another thing to pull it off, and Felvidek does that. On top of its incredible visual style, Felvidek has an absolutely wonderful soundtrack. Crafted by the Czech band Marcel Godot's Holy Crab, the soundtrack feels like a grotesque assault on the senses in the best way possible. It matches the psychedelic visuals and is constantly drifting between a smooth jazz, sunny Chiba soundtrack, and noise rock. It's often complete disregard for traditional setting and tone for the matched scenes in the game only add to the extremely unsettling nature of Felvidek, and it would be hard to imagine it any other way. The soundtrack is also like $6 over on Bandcamp. Seriously, you won't regret it. It is a huge shame, then, to say that on top of these two great pillars, sits a game that actually isn't very good. The plot is bland, the mechanics are almost completely missing, and the translation does more to hurt the game than help it. This is where things really start to go downhill. Felvidek follows Pavel, a knight who we are told, but never shown, is a raging alcoholic, recently separated from his wife and struggling to find meaning after the horrors of the battles of Kosovo. Pavel witnesses an explosion at an old castle and is sent along with the priest, Matej, to investigate. They soon learn that a cult has been transforming members of the local town into horrible monsters using demon-infected beans being mixed into a drink called kawa. Along the way, Pavel will deal with corrupt politicians, lecherous priests, lazy lords, and most terrifying of all, his ex-wife. By the end, Pavel and Matej will fight a couple of literal demons, disband the cult, and learn a little about themselves along the way. It's a fairly uninspired plot, but it's competently written and offers a few twists and some genuine humor. But it also has one of the most confusing endings I've ever seen. One of the biggest issues that Felvidek faces is its translation. Felvidek was originally written in Slovakian and was translated into English. Where it falls apart, though, is that the translator attempted to inject a sort of faux ye olde English, peppering thous, these, betwixts, and more into the dialogue, in a similar vein to the original Dragon Quest. What sets it apart, though, is Dragon Quest isn't trying to explore major concepts such as PTSD, male mental health, the doctrines of various religious sects within the church, and the complex history of Eastern Europe in the Middle Ages. Maybe it's just me, but I found myself needing to go back over the lines of dialogue several times to parse out what was actually being said. Part of that as well is that the game also desperately needs a primer. And this might be a North American issue, but the historical knot that was Eastern Europe in the late medieval ages is a challenging one. Having some kind of introduction to the factions that you'll be interacting with, and the recent history of the area is a must, because without that, many parts of the plot just either fall flat or don't make sense at all. Felvidek also has deeper issues with its core mechanics. On a mechanical level, Felvidek is just boring. Combat, like most turn-based RPGs, is a classic you go, they go. You input your commands and the turn plays out. Characters in Felvidek have the ability to attack, use feints, which are basically spells and skills, use items, or flee. It is a rote JRPG battle system, which is fine, I guess. We're in an RPG Maker game after all. But the fights are often long, and there is generally no reason to actually do them. Thankfully, they only happen in set locations, and there are maybe 20 of them across the entire game. Characters do not gain any sort of experience, and abilities are determined by your equipped weapon. At least the battle sequences do often feature some interesting and grotesque enemies to look at while you're slogging through them. And this guy. Can't forget this guy. Is Felvidek good? That's a really hard question to answer. I think the better question is, if there was more of it, would I want to play it? And the answer is no. Felvidek was actually really boring, and to me that's a huge disappointment. The characters are flat and uninteresting, the plot is basic and held back by terrible translation, and the mechanics are simply lacking at best and completely meaningless at worst. That said, I could look at Felvidek all day long. There's a reason why people talk about Jason and the Argonauts and not the story of King Midas. I would love to see the creator, Joseph Pavelka, be pulled into a team as a creative force and have the storytelling left to those who are more skilled at the art. As always, thanks for coming with me while we take a look at the oddity that is Felvidek. If you're interested in seeing the game in full, you can see the 3 streams over on the channel under the playlists. And if you like what I do, don't forget to do all the normal stuff you usually do. Typically, I stream several times a week across a few different games and genres. Hey, we'll see you in the next game. Oh, go buy that soundtrack.